Hey everyone, I've noticed that many of you are enjoying the videos, but most of you haven't subscribed yet. We're super close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support could help us reach that milestone. If you're enjoying the content, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really makes a huge difference and helps us keep creating more awesome content. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. I pour the coffee, watch it swirl in the mug, dark and bitter, just like how I feel most mornings now. The ritual calms me, even though it shouldn't. My hands move without thinking, pour, stir, sip, like a man on autopilot. But there's a tension today that I can't shake off. A pull, somewhere deep in my gut. Something is off. I glance at the kitchen clock. It's 7:05 a.m. She's upstairs, probably getting ready like she does every day. Same routine, same life. Yet I know something is different. It's like feeling a tremor before the earthquake. You can't see it, but you know it's there. I hear her footsteps. Maya, my wife of 18 years. Once upon a time, that word, wife, meant something to me. It meant loyalty, a partner. Now? Now it's just a word. I stare into the cup as her heels click down the stairs. There's something about the way she walks lately, a bit more bounce in her step. That bounce bothers me. Morning, she says, her voice distant. No kiss, no touch, no acknowledgement beyond the obligatory greeting. Morning, I mutter, not looking up. I hear the rustle of her bag as she places it on the counter. Her phone vibrates, and she snatches it up faster than I can blink. I catch a glimpse of her face, lips curved into a small, secret smile. It's that smile that twists something inside me. A smile I haven't seen in years. Not for me, anyway. Who is she smiling at? I watch her out of the corner of my eye as she taps away on her phone, her attention completely absorbed by the little screen. Another text, another laugh. It's almost as if I don't exist. I could be a shadow standing here and it wouldn't make a difference. There's something wrong. I feel it like a cold breeze against my skin. Got the company party tonight, I say, trying to fill the silence with something, anything. I know. Her tone is indifferent, her focus still locked on her phone. I already picked out my dress. Something inside me clenches. She used to care about these things, about us going together, about looking good for me. But now, it feels like I'm just a passenger in her life. I'm not driving this anymore. I don't think I have been for a long time. You excited? I ask, trying to mask the suspicion creeping into my voice. Her eyes flick to mine for the briefest moment. Cold, unreadable. Yeah, I guess. Should be fun. Should be fun. Fun for who? I feel that knot tighten in my chest again, that gut instinct screaming louder. There's something there, beneath the surface, but I can't touch it. Yet. I head into work, but my mind's not really there. Jeff, my boss, has been riding me harder lately, picking apart my presentations, interrupting me in meetings with his smug little quips. I think it's because I'm good at what I do, maybe better than he is, and that doesn't sit well with a guy like him. Jeff is the kind of man who thrives on being the alpha, the one in control, the one people look up to or fear. But lately it feels like there's more to it than that. He's always been a bit of a prick, but something's changed. Like he's enjoying it too much. He gives me these looks, these patronizing pats on the back that linger too long. I tell myself it's just my imagination, that I'm overthinking it, but deep down I know better. There's something between Jeff and me, some unspoken thing, and I can't quite figure it out. The party tonight, it's looming in my mind like a dark cloud. I don't want to go. I don't want to watch Maya pretend like we're still the happy couple, while Jeff lingers in the background, casting those damn smug glances my way. But there's no choice. I have to play the game, act like everything's fine. That's what people do, right? They pretend. We arrive at the party together, though it feels like we've walked in separately. Maya, stunning as always, in that little black dress that hugs her in all the right places. For a brief moment, I feel pride. She's my wife. But then, as soon as we step through the doors, it vanishes. She's not with me. Not really. She moves through the room with an energy I haven't seen in years, laughing a little too freely, touching people on the arm as she talks, her eyes bright, alive in a way they aren't when she's with me. And it hits me, harder than I expect, that she's been saving this part of herself for someone else. It's not an affair I know about, not yet, but I feel it in my bones. I catch Jeff's eye across the room. He raises his glass to me, a smile that's too wide, too friendly. My stomach tightens. I know that smile. It's the smile of a man who thinks he's won something. Maya finds her way to him at the bar, naturally, like a magnet being drawn in. They laugh, too close. She touches his arm, a light graze, but it feels heavy, like a punch in the gut. I can't pull my eyes away from them. Her body language is different, open, flirtatious. He leans in, says something that makes her laugh, a real laugh. It's been years since I've heard that from her. A hand claps my shoulder, startling me. One of the execs, someone who doesn't matter, is making small talk, but I can't focus. My eyes dart back to Maya and Jeff, and I see them walking away together, slipping through the crowd like ghosts. I watch them go, my feet frozen in place. I try to tell myself it's innocent. Maybe they're discussing work. Maybe it's nothing. But the knot in my chest tightens. I feel the blood drain from my face as the minutes tick by, each one slower than the last. They're gone for too long, long enough that I can't keep making excuses. I swallow the bile rising in my throat and shove down the anger, but it festers just below the surface. When they finally return, her lipstick is slightly smudged, her hair a little out of place. Jeff's grin is wide, that same knowing smirk I've come to hate. He claps me on the back too hard like a buddy. I want to punch him in the face. Instead, I smile back. My lips feel tight, like they're holding back a scream. "Good seeing you, Dave," he says, his tone patronizing, like he's doing me a favor just by talking to me. I nod, but I can't speak. The anger's boiling inside me, but I keep it contained. Barely. Back home, it's quiet. Too quiet. Maya heads straight for the bathroom without a word, disappearing upstairs. I stay downstairs, staring at the empty kitchen, the ticking clock on the wall. The party plays on a loop in my head. The way she laughed with him, the way she touched him. I don't go upstairs. I don't confront her. Not yet. I need to think. I need to figure this out, but the knot in my stomach is making it hard to breathe. She knows. She knows I saw it, but she doesn't care. That's what's worse. The indifference. The coldness. It's like I don't even matter. Hours pass, and I finally go up to bed. She's already asleep, or pretending to be. Her back is turned to me, just like it has been for the last few years. I lie there in the dark, listening to her breathing, trying to remember when it all started falling apart. Was it gradual? Did I just stop paying attention? Or was it always like this, and I was too blind to see it? I stare at the ceiling, my mind racing, the tension in my chest coiling tighter. Something's about to break. I don't know what, but I can feel it. It's coming, and when it does, I'm not sure what will be left standing. The next morning, I'm back at the coffee pot, the same routine, but it feels heavier now. Maya's upstairs again, taking her time, probably texting whoever it is she's texting. I don't need to see her phone to know. I can feel it. She comes down, same as yesterday, same as every day. But today, I'm not as numb. I watch her closely, searching for the cracks, the signs of the betrayal I know is there. She smiles again at her phone, oblivious to the way I'm watching her, studying her. "Big plans today?" I ask, my voice calm, too calm. "Just the usual." She glances up, meets my eyes for a second too long. There's a flicker of something there, something like guilt, but it's gone before I can grasp it. I sip my coffee, nodding, pretending everything's fine, but I know it isn't. Something's about to snap, and when it does, I won't be the one left picking up the pieces. The next few days drift by like a bad dream. I go through the motions, wake up, make coffee, drive to work, but my mind isn't really there. It's somewhere else, hovering in the spaces between what I know and what I suspect. I can't shake the feeling that Maya's slipping further away, and I have no idea how to stop it, if it even can be stopped. Maya has become a ghost in our house. She's there physically, sure, but everything else about her has changed. I barely see her, and when I do, it's like we're in two separate worlds. Our conversations have become nothing more than quick exchanges. What time are you getting home? Did you pay the bills? And even those are starting to feel like obligations rather than actual interactions. She's always on her phone now, and it's not subtle. She doesn't even bother to hide it. She used to sit with me on the couch in the evenings, even if it was just to scroll through her emails or watch TV in silence. But now, she's tucked away in corners of the house where I can't reach her. If she comes home at all, she locks herself in the bathroom or the bedroom. I hear her phone buzzing, sometimes in the middle of the night, and when I wake up, her side of the bed is cold, untouched. I try to shake it off. I tell myself I'm being paranoid, that I'm overreacting, but it doesn't work. There's a cold, hard truth pressing down on me. I'm losing her, if I haven't already. At work, Jeff's behavior has only gotten worse. He interrupts me constantly during meetings, picking apart my ideas, making me feel like an idiot in front of everyone else. I've always been good at what I do, better than him, frankly, but now it's like he's determined to humiliate me at every turn. And the way he looks at me, there's something in his eyes that I can't place. It's not just arrogance anymore. It's like he's daring me to say something, to react. He enjoys watching me squirm, and I hate how I've let it get this far. The team doesn't say anything. No one ever does. They sit there in silence, pretending not to notice, but I can feel their eyes on me, pitying me. They see what's happening. They see Jeff tearing me apart piece by piece. But no one dares stand up to him. They can't afford to. Jeff is a manipulator, and he knows exactly how to wield his power. After another one of his public dressing downs, I walk back to my office with my fists clenched, trying to keep the anger down. I tell myself it's just work, just Jeff being Jeff, but something inside me is boiling. I can't focus. All I can see is Maya laughing with him at the party, the way they disappeared for too long, how they came back looking too disheveled, too comfortable. There's a pattern emerging, and it's getting clearer every day. Jeff isn't just undermining me at work. He's taken something far more personal. It's like a knife twisting in my back, and I'm powerless to pull it out. One evening, after she's disappeared upstairs with her phone again, I'm sitting in the living room, staring at the walls, at the life I thought we built together. The framed photos of our vacations, our wedding, the distant smiles we used to share. I can't reconcile those images with the reality I'm living now. We're strangers in the same house. I go upstairs, creeping softly, though I don't know why. I stop outside the bedroom door. It's cracked open, just a sliver, and I hear her voice. She's on the phone, talking in low tones, laughing at something, her voice light and playful in a way that makes my skin crawl. I lean in closer, my ear nearly pressed to the wood. Tomorrow night, I hear her say, the words wrapped in something sweet, something dangerous. Yeah, I'll meet you there. No, David's got some work thing. He won't even notice. I freeze. The blood drains from my face. I don't need to hear the rest. The pieces all click into place. I've been trying to deny it, trying to ignore the signs, but here it is, laid out so plainly in front of me. She's meeting him, Jeff, again. They're laughing about it, about me. My chest tightens, and for a second, I think I might pass out. But then something cold, something hard, settles inside me. I turn around and go back downstairs, moving on autopilot again. My mind is spinning, but there's a part of me that feels calmer now, clearer. I knew this was coming, didn't I? Somewhere deep down, I knew. I grab a drink from the kitchen and sit in the dark, the glass cold in my hand. Numbness settles over me. My life has been ripped apart, but I can't even feel it. Not yet. The next morning, I wake up before her. I stand in the kitchen again, coffee mug in hand, staring at nothing, my thoughts numb but racing at the same time. She comes downstairs eventually, yawning like she's had the best night's sleep of her life. I can't look at her. I'm afraid of what I might say, afraid of what I might do. You working late again tonight? She asks casually, like she hasn't already planned to meet him while I'm supposed to be oblivious. Yeah, I lie, my voice cold, distant. Late. She doesn't even flinch. All right, I'll probably just grab dinner with some friends. Friends, right. I nod, not trusting myself to say anything more. I watch her leave, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, her hair perfect, her lips freshly painted. I've spent 18 years with this woman, and I feel like I don't know her at all. She's become someone else, someone cold, someone calculated. Or maybe she's always been like this, and I've just been too blind to see it. I can't stand the house anymore, so I drive to work early. The office is empty, and I sit at my desk, staring at the computer screen without really seeing it. Jeff will be here soon. He'll stroll in, probably with that same smug smile, acting like he owns the place, acting like he owns my life. I keep playing it over in my head, the sound of Maya's voice, how she said my name like I was nothing, like I didn't matter. They've been laughing at me, both of them, and I let it happen. My phone buzzes, a message from Jeff. Meeting at 3, don't be late. I throw the phone down on my desk, rage bubbling up again. I can't stand the thought of sitting across from him, pretending everything's fine, pretending I don't know. I want to rip that smug grin off his face, but I don't. Not yet. Instead, I force myself to breathe, to think. There's no point in acting on impulse. That's what they expect. They want me to snap, to break down, to lose control. That would make it easy for them, but I'm not going to give them the satisfaction. I spend the rest of the day pretending to work, but my mind is elsewhere. I'm piecing together the little details, trying to understand how far this has gone. I don't know when it started, and I don't care. All I care about is what I do next, how I handle this, how I take back control. Later that night, I sit in my car outside a restaurant, engine idling. I've been here for 20 minutes, watching the front entrance. Maya is inside, no doubt laughing with Jeff over dinner, sharing private smiles and touches that used to belong to me. My hands grip the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turn white, but I force myself to stay calm. She thinks I'm working late. She thinks I'm too oblivious to notice what's happening right under my nose. That's what they both think, and it's why they'll slip up. People like Jeff, people like Maya, they thrive on control. They think they're invincible, untouchable. I wait another 10 minutes, just long enough to make sure. Then I see them. Jeff walks out first, holding the door for her. She's laughing, her arm hooked around his, and they look so comfortable together it makes my stomach churn. I want to get out of the car, to march over there and tear them apart. But I stay put. I can't lose control, not yet. They get into his car and I sit there watching them drive off. It's like a part of me knew this moment was coming. A slow-motion car wreck I saw from miles away, but I kept hoping I'd steer out of the way in time. I didn't. Now there's nothing left but wreckage. When I get home, Maya's already in bed pretending to be asleep. She's not. I know she's awake, but we both keep up the charade. We've become experts at pretending, at building walls around ourselves and pretending not to notice the cracks. But the cracks are too big now, and they're spreading fast. I sit on the edge of the bed, staring at the dark outline of her back, my mind churning with everything I've seen, everything I know. The anger is there, hot and fierce. But it's more than that now. It's cold too, calculating. Tomorrow, I'll confront her. Not with words, not with a fight. That's what she expects, but I'm not giving her the satisfaction of my anger. No, I'll wait. I'll plan. I'll make sure she feels the weight of what she's done piece by piece, until there's nothing left of the life she thinks she's built with him. They'll both feel it, and they'll never see it coming. The rage that pulsed through me was no longer the red-hot fire of betrayal. It had cooled, hardened into something cold, calculating. I wasn't going to let Jeff or Maya get away with this. I wasn't going to be their joke any longer. I spent hours in the dark of the living room that night, staring out the window, the streetlights casting a dull glow on the quiet suburban street. Inside me, plans began to form. I would dismantle them both, piece by piece, brick by brick, until everything they'd built together was nothing but rubble. But I had to be careful. Revenge couldn't be impulsive. They expected me to break, to lash out in some dramatic fashion, but that wasn't what I had in mind. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. No, I'd stay calm, composed, just as I had all these years. I'd wait for the perfect moment, then strike when they least expected it. The first step was information. Jeff had weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and I'd spent enough time around him to know where to look. His arrogance was his Achilles heel. He was too confident, too secure in his position at the company, and I knew he'd cut a few corners to get there. My job was to find those corners, dig them up, and expose them to the light. The next morning, I returned to work with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. I walked into the office, past the sterile rows of cubicles and buzzing phones, and nodded at a few colleagues who glanced my way with barely concealed pity. I ignored them. Jeff was waiting for me in the boardroom, that same smug smile playing on his lips. "Morning, Dave. Bisson," he said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "Ready for the big presentation?" I nodded, forcing a tight smile. Always. I'd been planning this presentation for weeks. It was my biggest project of the quarter, a strategy I developed to push our market share up by 5%. Jeff had been passive-aggressively undermining me in every meeting, dropping snide comments in front of the board members. But today, I was ready for him. I knew his tactics, and I was already 2 steps ahead. As the meeting began, Jeff cut me off like clockwork. Every time I tried to explain my plan, he'd swoop in, twist my words, and offer his own improvements. He did it with such finesse that it almost looked like he was helping, but I knew what he was doing, and I could see the board was buying it again. But this time, I had a card up my sleeve. Halfway through the meeting, as Jeff rambled on about his own brilliant contributions to my work, I subtly slid a document across the table. A financial report I'd had the accounting team dig up for me. A little digging of my own had uncovered something Jeff probably thought was buried: misallocated funds, conveniently shuffled around to pad his own budget at the expense of other departments. It was enough to raise a few eyebrows, maybe even prompt an internal audit. The CFO picked up the document, his brow furrowing. "Jeff, what's this?" Jeff froze for a second, then flashed his usual grin. "Just a minor error, I'm sure. Accounting must have missed something. I'll take care of it." But I saw the flicker of doubt in the CFO's eyes. He wasn't buying it, not completely. That was all I needed. The seed was planted. Jeff had just become a little less invincible in their eyes. I kept my face neutral, barely allowing myself a glance in Jeff's direction. The meeting continued, but I knew I'd thrown the first punch. Jeff was on edge for the rest of the day, and I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he shot me quick, assessing looks whenever he thought no one else was watching. He knew something had shifted, but he couldn't be sure what. Good. Let him sweat. At home, Maya was barely present. She came and went like a shadow, her phone glued to her hand. Sometimes she would say she was meeting with friends. Other times she didn't bother to tell me where she was going, and I didn't ask. I was done playing the clueless husband. Instead, I focused on the next stage of my plan. One night, I waited until Maya was asleep, her phone still resting on the nightstand, the screen dark. I'd been patient, waiting for the right opportunity to get access to it. Tonight was that night. Carefully, I picked up the phone, using the thumb she'd left carelessly pressed against it to unlock the screen. I scrolled through her messages with Jeff, reading through their little inside jokes, their plans to meet, the brazen flirtations that made my stomach churn. But it was more than just their affair I was looking for. I needed to know how far this had gone. Was Jeff planning something bigger? Did he have more in store for me than just stealing my wife? And there it was, a thread of emails buried in the back of Maya's inbox, forwarded from Jeff. They discussed more than just their secret rendezvous. It was about me, about how Jeff had been slowly positioning himself to edge me out of the company, taking credit for my work, sowing doubts about my leadership abilities with the board. And Maya, she was helping him. She'd been feeding him information, my information, for months. She'd been sabotaging me from inside my own home. My chest tightened, the fury bubbling up again, but I pushed it down. I couldn't afford to lose control now. I scrolled through the emails, absorbing every detail, every line of manipulation. They were planning to make their move soon. A big meeting with the board where Jeff would propose a reorganization of the company, one that conveniently left me on the outside looking in. I locked her phone, set it back on the nightstand, and quietly left the room. This was more than just an affair. This was a full-blown coup, but they weren't going to win. Not now that I knew the whole game. The following weeks were a blur of calculated moves. I gathered every piece of dirt I could find on Jeff. His fraudulent financials were just the tip of the iceberg. He'd been covering up more than just a few missing dollars. There were discrepancies in vendor contracts, shady dealings with clients, and backdoor agreements that, if exposed, could sink him for good. I compiled everything, building a case so airtight even Jeff couldn't talk his way out of it. Meanwhile, I made sure the right people at the company started to hear whispers about his questionable practices. Nothing concrete yet, just enough to make them wary, enough to make them start watching him closely. I also turned my focus on Maya, but in a different way. Her downfall wouldn't come from financial ruin or professional embarrassment. No, with her, it was personal. I started planting small rumors in our social circle, carefully leaking information about her affair with Jeff. It didn't take long for word to spread. Suddenly, the women she lunched with were a little colder, the invitations a little less frequent. The cracks in her perfect little life were starting to show. She noticed, of course. "Everyone's acting weird lately," she said one evening, scrolling through her phone with a frown. "I don't know why." I just shrugged. "People are fickle." She didn't suspect me. Why would she? In her mind, I was still the oblivious husband, too blind to see what was right in front of me. But that was changing, slowly, just as I planned. Then came the day of the big meeting, the one Jeff and Maya had been planning for weeks. I walked into the boardroom with my head held high, my case against Jeff meticulously prepared. He smiled at me when I entered, but there was something forced about it now. He was nervous. He could feel the walls closing in, even if he didn't know why. The meeting went as expected. Jeff made his pitch for the reorganization, and at first the board listened. But then, as I presented my own case, subtly exposing his lies and financial misdeeds, the mood in the room shifted. The board members exchanged glances, their faces growing stiffer by the minute. By the time I was done, Jeff's smug smile had vanished. He tried to recover, throwing out excuses, explanations, but it was too late. The damage was done. As I walked out of that room, I knew Jeff's days at the company were numbered. He might not go down today, but the seeds had been planted. His reputation was tarnished, his credibility shattered, and I wasn't done yet. That evening, I sent Maya a single text message. It was a screenshot of one of Jeff's emails, an email where he'd casually mentioned using her as a pawn in his scheme. Her response was immediate. "What is this?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Let her figure it out on her own. The next few days were chaos. Maya confronted Jeff, and their little house of cards came crashing down. Their affair was exposed to everyone. Jeff's career was in freefall, and Maya, well, she had nothing left. Her reputation, her social circle, her perfect little life, it all crumbled around her. I watched it happen from a distance, feeling, what? Satisfaction? Relief? No. It wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. It felt hollow, like a victory that cost too much. But at least now, they both knew one thing for certain. They had underestimated me, and I'd made sure they paid for it. The satisfaction I expected after Jeff's fall never came. Instead, there was only the quiet hum of my computer, the soft tap of keys as I went through the motions of another day at work. But beneath the surface, everything was in motion. Jeff was hanging by a thread, and soon that thread would snap. I'd make sure of it. My next move was subtle, almost imperceptible. I planted more seeds, this time directly with the board. A carefully timed email to one of the senior members, flagged as confidential, hinted at discrepancies in Jeff's financial reports. I didn't attach the proof yet. That would come later. For now, the goal was to make them doubt him, to chip away at the trust he'd built. I knew Jeff was feeling the pressure. It was all over his face when I passed him in the hallway. His smile had faltered, and there was a twitch in his eye when he spoke to people now, like he was constantly bracing for a blow that hadn't landed yet. He avoided me, no longer offering his smug backslaps or thinly veiled insults in meetings. Good. He should be nervous. The next phase required patience. I'd gathered enough dirt to bury him, but it wasn't time yet. Instead, I watched him unravel slowly. He began making mistakes, missing deadlines, stumbling over details in presentations. The board members were noticing. They exchanged glances during meetings, and I knew they were starting to see what I wanted them to see. Jeff was no longer the golden boy. One afternoon, as I sat in my office pretending to work, I got the call I'd been waiting for. The CFO had found enough irregularities in Jeff's accounts to demand a formal audit. They were opening an investigation. It was happening. Jeff had no idea what was coming. He'd been so confident, so sure of his control over everything, that he'd let his arrogance blind him. But now, with the walls closing in, he was finally beginning to sense the danger. I saw it in the way he looked at me, the way his eyes lingered too long, searching for cracks in my calm. There weren't any. I made sure of that. I kept playing my role, the loyal employee, still delivering strong numbers and doing my job with precision. Jeff's fall wouldn't be enough. I needed to make sure he had nothing left to cling to, no chance for redemption. So I accelerated the rumors, whispers about his erratic behavior, his questionable judgment, his increasingly tense relationships with clients. I even made sure a few offhand comments reached the right ears about Maya's affair, about how it was affecting his work. All of it was designed to make the board question his stability. It was working. But there was still Maya. She wasn't going down without a fight. Her confrontation with Jeff had been ugly, but it hadn't been public. That was the key. She still had her friends, the last shreds of her social standing, and that had to be taken away too. I started small, leaking photos of her and Jeff at restaurants, sharing private moments in public places. I made sure these photos found their way into the hands of her closest friends, the ones who prided themselves on moral superiority. Soon enough, the gossip spread like wildfire. Maya wasn't just a woman having an affair. She was a woman who had betrayed her husband of 18 years with his boss. In a circle like ours, that was enough to ruin her. She sensed it too. One evening, after a particularly strained silence at home, she asked me, "David, have you heard anything about Jeff and me?" I looked at her, keeping my face neutral. "I've heard some things, Maya. People talk." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for some sign of my involvement. She wouldn't find it. I'd covered my tracks too well. "I didn't mean for this to happen, David," she said, her voice cracking slightly. It just got out of control." "Is that your excuse?" I asked, my voice cold. "That it got out of control?" She flinched. I wasn't sure if it was the tone of my voice or the realization that she no longer had any leverage over me. Either way, the effect was the same. She was crumbling, and I could see it in her eyes, the same eyes that had once held all the cold indifference in the world. Now, she was the one frozen out. The next day, I received an email from Jeff. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to regain control. He wanted a private meeting. "Just to clear the air," he wrote, "there's been a lot of misunderstandings lately. We should talk." I agreed, but on my terms. We met at a quiet bar, far from the office, a place I knew wouldn't be frequented by anyone we knew. Jeff arrived first, sitting in a dark corner, nursing a drink. His posture was tense, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. As I sat down across from him, he smiled, but it was strained. "David, I'm glad you came. I think we've had there's been a lot going on, and I just want to make sure we're still on the same page." I didn't say anything. I let him squirm. "I've heard some things," he continued, his voice lowering. "Rumors. About the audit. About people talking behind my back. I don't know if you've heard them too, but, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Jeff," I said calmly. "The audit is real. The board is looking into everything. And you're done." He stared at me, the color draining from his face. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've been siphoning company funds for months, hiding it in vendor contracts and fake expenses. I have the proof. The board has the proof. And they're not going to cover for you anymore." "You—" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't prove that. There's no way." "I don't need to prove it," I said, cutting him off. "The audit will do that for me." I saw it then, the moment it hit him. He'd lost. All the scheming, the manipulation, the backdoor deals, it had all unraveled, and he had nothing left to cling to. "You think you're better than me?" he spat, his voice rising. "You think you've won?" I smiled, a cold, joyless smile. I don't need to be better than you, Jeff. I just needed to be smarter. And I was. He lunged across the table, his face contorted with rage, but I didn't move. The bartender gave him a sharp look, and Jeff froze, realizing how close he'd come to making a public scene. He pulled back, breathing hard, his hands trembling. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low, venomous. "No, Jeff," I replied, standing up. "You're the one who'll regret it." As I walked out of the bar, I felt a cold sense of closure. Jeff had been destroyed, not by some grand spectacle, but by the slow, inevitable crushing weight of his own mistakes. And I had orchestrated it all. Maya's downfall came swiftly after that. The proof I'd sent her, the emails between her and Jeff, showing how he'd used her as a pawn, was the final nail in her coffin. She confronted him, of course, but by then it was too late. Their affair was no longer a secret, and now the entire social circle knew that Maya had been betrayed by the very man she'd risked everything for. She lost everything, her friends, her reputation, even her dignity. The whispers followed her everywhere she went, the pitying looks, the subtle rejection from the people who had once welcomed her into their homes. One night, as I sat in the living room, I heard her sobbing upstairs. It wasn't the quiet, controlled crying I'd heard from her before. This was raw, broken. She was finally feeling the weight of everything she'd lost. I should have felt something. Maybe satisfaction, maybe relief. But instead, I felt nothing. When she came downstairs the next morning, her face pale and drawn, she didn't speak. She just sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she picked at her breakfast. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered finally. I don't know what to say." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. The woman sitting across from me was a shell of the person I'd married. But then again, maybe that person had never really existed. "You don't need to say anything," I replied, my voice cold. "We're done." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She knew it was over, just as Jeff had known. As she left the house that day, I watched her go, feeling nothing but the cold certainty that I had done what needed to be done. The game was over. I had won. But as I sat there in the quiet, empty house, a thought gnawed at the back of my mind. If I had won, why didn't it feel like victory? I sat in the empty house, the silence pressing in around me like a weight I couldn't shake off. Maya was gone. Her things were packed, and the last traces of her had vanished, leaving only echoes of a life that had disintegrated piece by piece. The house felt hollow now, just walls and furniture, a monument to everything that had crumbled. I thought I would feel something, satisfaction maybe, relief. But all I felt was a strange emptiness, a void where the anger and drive had once been. I had spent months meticulously planning their downfall, tearing apart the fragile world Jeff and Maya had built on top of my humiliation. And now it was over. They were both gone, broken in their own ways, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt numb. The news of Jeff's resignation had spread through the company like wildfire. The board didn't make a big show of it. They never do with things like this, but everyone knew. Whispers followed in the hallways, rumors circling about the audit, the financial discrepancies, and Jeff's sudden departure. Officially, it was health reasons, but anyone paying attention knew the truth. He'd been forced out. There was no saving his reputation, no path back into the company. He was done. That should have brought me some level of closure. He had tormented me for years, undermined my work, humiliated me in front of the board. He had slept with my wife, for God's sake. But as I stood in my office looking out over the city, the victory felt hollow. Jeff was gone, but the damage he'd done to my life, to my marriage, was still there, like scars that refused to heal. And in taking him down, I had burned bridges of my own. At the office, people started treating me differently. There was a new distance, a wariness in their eyes. I had always been the steady one, the quiet worker who got things done. But now there was something else. They respected me, sure, but not in the way I wanted. It was the respect you give to someone dangerous, someone who'd shown a capacity for ruthlessness. I'd made them afraid of me, and in doing so, I'd isolated myself even further. I could feel it at meetings. The conversations grew stiffer, more formal. The easy camaraderie I once had with some of the team evaporated. They weren't sure who I really was anymore. The guy they thought they knew, the one who just took it on the chin and kept going, had shown a darker side. And no one wants to be close to the guy who can destroy someone like Jeff without breaking a sweat. I didn't care about Jeff's downfall anymore. What haunted me was the aftermath of my revenge. The way it had twisted everything around me, changed how people saw me, how I saw myself. Then there was Maya. She hadn't even fought when I told her we were done. The quiet acceptance in her eyes had stung more than I wanted to admit. After all the destruction I'd unleashed, all the betrayal I'd uncovered, I thought I would feel some satisfaction in seeing her broken. But instead, I just felt tired. Her leaving wasn't a triumph, it was inevitable. A final step in a dance that had long since ended. I kept expecting some part of me to miss her. 18 years together, and now she was gone like she'd never existed. At night, I lay awake in the empty bed, the house too quiet, too still. I thought about the life we'd built, all the years we'd spent side by side, and I wondered how much of it had ever been real. How long had she been pretending? How long had I? The echoes of our last conversation played in my mind, the apology that felt too late, too hollow. I should have hated her, should have wanted her to suffer for what she'd done. But instead, all I could feel was a strange sense of loss, like I had not only lost her, but some part of myself along the way. Work wasn't much of a distraction. The promotion I'd been aiming for never came. Not that I really cared anymore. The company had bigger problems to deal with in the wake of Jeff's downfall. His financial mismanagement had left a mess that would take months, if not years, to untangle. And I was still there, doing my job. But the fire that had driven me for so long had burned out. I went through the motions, but the passion was gone. It didn't take long before the rumors about me started. I overheard snippets in the break room, colleagues whispering when they thought I wasn't around. The man who had brought down Jeff, the guy who had exposed the affair. No one knew the full story, but they all had their theories. Some saw me as the hero who had taken down a corrupt boss. Others saw me as something darker. Either way, I was alone in the middle of it. One night, I found myself staring at the whiskey bottle in the cabinet, wondering if it would dull the edges of everything. I poured a glass, the amber liquid catching the soft glow of the kitchen light. I took a sip, the burn spreading through my chest, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. The weight of everything I'd done hung around me like a chain, pulling me down into the quiet despair I couldn't shake. I had wanted justice. I had wanted revenge. I had wanted them both to feel the pain they'd inflicted on me. And I had gotten it. But now, standing in the wreckage of everything I'd torn apart, I couldn't help but wonder if it had been worth it. I had won. Jeff was ruined. Maya was gone. But in the process, I had lost something I couldn't get back. I had lost the man I used to be, the man who could still find joy in the quiet moments, who still believed in the life he had built. Now, all that was left was the hollow shell of what used to be. The silence in the house was oppressive. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days outside of work, and even then, the conversations were brief, transactional. I thought about calling a friend, reaching out to someone, but the truth was, I didn't know who to call anymore. My friends, the ones who had been there through the years, had grown distant, unsure of what to make of the man I'd become. I poured another drink, staring out the window at the dark, empty street. The night stretched on, and I sat there, wondering when I had become so alone. I had always prided myself on my resilience, my ability to weather any storm, but this was different. This was a kind of isolation I hadn't prepared for. I had built my life around a marriage that was now dust, a career that had lost its meaning, and revenge that had left me with nothing but emptiness. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had set out to destroy them, but in the end, I had destroyed myself too. A few days later, I received an email from the board. They were offering me a new position, Jeff's old role. It was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? A step up, more responsibility, more money. The culmination of all the years I'd spent climbing the corporate ladder. But as I stared at the offer, the words blurred in front of me. The title meant nothing. The money meant nothing. I had spent so long chasing something that, in the end, wasn't going to fill the void. I didn't need more power or more success. I needed something else, something I wasn't even sure existed anymore. I closed the email without responding. As the days blurred into weeks, I found myself reflecting more and more on the choices I'd made. The anger that had driven me, the obsession with revenge, it had consumed me, changed me. I had thought that taking control, taking them down, would give me some sense of closure. But it hadn't. All it had done was leave me standing in the ashes of a life I no longer recognized. The weight of that realization settled deep in my chest. There was no going back. I had crossed a line, and on the other side, there was nothing but the cold truth that I had sacrificed too much for too little. I won. I got my revenge. But in the end, I wasn't sure what that victory was worth. I stared at the ceiling, the dim light from the street lamp outside casting shadows that danced along the walls of my bedroom. Another sleepless night. The bed felt too big now, too empty. Even though Maya and I had stopped sharing the bed long before she left, her absence still gnawed at me. I thought about everything I'd done, the moves I made, the calculated steps that led to the destruction of two lives, Jeff's, Maya's. But what had I really won? The silence in the house felt suffocating. Every room, every corner reminded me of what I used to have, or at least what I thought I had. The love I once believed existed between Maya and me had vanished into nothingness, and now, in its place, there was just this cold emptiness. No amount of revenge could fill that void. I had burned down my entire world just to watch it turn to ash. I swung my legs out of bed and sat there for a moment, head in my hands. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. My phone buzzed occasionally, work-related emails, messages from colleagues, but I didn't respond. I didn't feel like the person they knew anymore. The David who went into work every day, did his job with quiet precision, and came home to a semblance of a life was gone. In his place was something darker. Standing up, I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The world outside kept turning, oblivious to the destruction I had wrought. I thought back to that night at the work party, the way Maya had laughed with Jeff, her flirtation so obvious now that I look back on it. She hadn't cared then, and she didn't care now, but I did. I cared too much, and that was the problem. I thought ruining them would give me peace. I thought watching their world collapse would make up for the years I had wasted. But standing here now, watching the world outside carry on, I realized the truth. There was no satisfaction, no justice. Only a hollow victory. I had become what I despised, a man driven by anger, consumed by the need for control. I had let that need burn away everything else. The years I spent building a life with Maya, the friendships I'd let wither away, the career I'd once been proud of, it all felt meaningless now. I had sacrificed it all on the altar of revenge, and what did I have left? Nothing. Not really. I walked downstairs, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty house. The kitchen was as cold and sterile as it had been since Maya left. Her absence was a constant reminder that whatever life I thought we'd had was a lie. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry at her anymore. She'd made her choice. She'd done what she thought would make her happy, and I'd responded in the only way I knew how, by destroying her happiness in return. But it hadn't made me happy. It hadn't fixed anything. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, staring down into the clear liquid as if it held some kind of answer. What was left for me now? I had no idea. I'd gotten what I wanted. Jeff was gone, humiliated, stripped of his power and reputation. Maya had lost everything too. Her friends, her social standing, everything she'd built her identity around had crumbled. I'd watched it happen step by step. And now I was alone. I set the glass down on the counter and walked to the living room. The photos on the mantel caught my eye, images of a life that no longer existed. There was one of Maya and me on our wedding day, her smile bright, her eyes full of life. I wondered how much of that was real. How much had she been pretending, even then? I thought back to our last conversation, the way she'd looked at me with tears in her eyes, finally realizing how far she had fallen. I had expected to feel something in that moment, triumph maybe, or at least closure. But all I'd felt was a deep, gnawing emptiness, the kind that wouldn't go away, no matter how many people I took down with me. I picked up the photo, staring at the man I used to be. He looked younger, more innocent somehow. Back then, I still believed in the life I'd built. I believed in love, in loyalty. I believed in Maya. But now, standing here, I couldn't even recognize that person. I had changed, hardened by betrayal, consumed by revenge. I had thought that if I could just win, if I could take back control, I'd feel whole again. But I didn't. I felt like a ghost, haunting the ruins of my own life. Setting the photo back down, I sat on the couch and leaned my head back, closing my eyes. The house was too quiet, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but who? The friends I once had distanced themselves, unsure of the man I had become. They didn't know how to talk to me anymore, and I didn't blame them. I'd isolated myself slowly but surely. And now, with nothing left to fight for, nothing left to tear apart, I was left with myself, my thoughts, my regrets. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. Maybe this was the price of revenge. Maybe this was what it meant to win the way I had. I had set out to destroy the people who had wronged me, and I had succeeded. But in the process, I had destroyed something far more valuable, my own sense of self. I used to think of myself as a good man. Maybe not perfect, but good. I worked hard, I took care of my responsibilities, and I tried to be the kind of husband Maya deserved. But now, sitting here, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The man I had become was colder, harder, more cynical, and I didn't know if I could ever go back to who I used to be. Maybe that was the real tragedy. Not the loss of my marriage, not the destruction of Jeff's career or Maya's reputation, but the loss of myself. I stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the faint hum of a car engine, the world moving on without me. Life was happening out there, beyond these walls, but I felt disconnected from it, like a spectator in someone else's story. I had told myself that revenge was worth it, that I would feel better once I'd evened the score, but now, looking back, I wasn't so sure. The victory I had craved for so long felt like ashes in my mouth, leaving behind nothing but a bitter taste. I had won, yes, but at what cost? I had lost my marriage. I had lost my friends. And somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. The glass of water still sat on the kitchen counter, untouched. I walked over, picked it up, and took a sip. The cool liquid didn't offer the clarity I was hoping for, but it was something. A reminder that I was still here, still alive, even if I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. I set the glass down and looked around the empty house. The life I had known was gone, and I didn't know what came next. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time to figure it out. Time to rebuild something new, something better. I wasn't the man I used to be, and I wasn't sure if I ever could be again, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to let go of who I had been and find out who I could become. As I stood there, the first rays of morning light breaking through the window, I felt a strange sense of peace, not the kind that came from winning or losing, but the kind that came from acceptance. The acceptance that, no matter what I had lost, I was still here, still breathing, still alive. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough.